Hello, everyone. I'm Bo from Brutal Commentary, and today I'm going to be breaking down our next matchup for UFC Vegas 112. I also apologize for calling this 113. Misinformation on my part. My apologies. Anyway, in this matchup, we have Kennedy Nzechukwu taking on Marcus Buchecha. In this matchup, you have basically two extremes, as one of the most credentialed grappler in the history of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that being Buchecha, stepping in with a fighter whose primary weapons are his size, length, and a growing command of striking range. Buchecha brings a grappling resume that few athletes can in MMA can match. World level jiu-jitsu, elite positional awareness, and a deep understanding of how to turn even minor openings into dominant positions. Meanwhile, Nzechukwu enters as a seasoned MMA striker, long, composed, durable, and increasingly comfortable in dictating the pace of a fight with range and control. I mean, this is the last man, actually the only person, to beat Carlos Ulberg. Not just beat him, but knock him out. And the intrigue of this matchup comes to how sharply their strengths diverge. Buchecha's path is crystal clear. Close the distance, initiate grappling, and let his world-class jiu-jitsu take over. Nzechukwu's path is equally defined. Keep the fight standing, manage distance, and prevent Buchecha from building the grappling sequences that have fueled him. Now, some of you may not know, Buchecha also comes from ONE FC. He did all right in the promotion, with his only loss at the time coming to Ruju, who is the current heavyweight champion in the promotion. So it's not like his loss is against a bum. And Martin Budai, say what you want about him, is actually a pretty good heavyweight. I've come to understand this and respect it, and I do think it's BS that Budai got cut. So this isn't really just striker versus grappler. I mean, it is, but it's more of a test of whether pure elite grappling can consistently override a massive gap in striking experience and stand-up comfort. And that tension between one specialist and one well-rounded, physically imposing striker is more or less the story of this fight. So without further ado, let's break down their styles. Starting with Nzechukwu. He fights with a really good calmness to him. His demeanor inside the cage is pretty controlled, measured, and sometimes serene. Once he gets into the flow, I should say. But within that calm is a striking game built around a long, disciplined weapons. His jab is his most reliable tool, snapping, straight, and kind of teeth rattling, if you will. And Nzechukwu uses his reach not just to score, but also to control the space of the fight. At range, he's pretty methodical. Nzechukwu frames well, manages distance with good teeps and long straights, and uses his height to create a layered of difficulty opponents must navigate before they can get any meaningful offense. Honestly, Nzechukwu's move up from light heavyweight to heavyweight was a good move, and you kind of saw it in the immediate results of two straight wins or first round knockouts of Chris Barnett and Lucas Bresky, who, granted are no longer in the UFC and aren't that good, but still, he did exactly what he's supposed to do. And you see the frame he has for heavyweight, it's good, and it's not. And he put on the weight the right way. He didn't come in chubby. He came in 240 pounds of well-built-in muscle. Oh, now Nzechukwu's power isn't reckless or wild. It's connected into timing, especially as he picks up on predictable patterns. His calmness allows him to stay collected under pressure, and he's shown the ability to rally from adversity, which you saw with Ulberg, who was having his way with him on the feet, mostly in the first round. But then as the fight went on, Nzechukwu weathered a storm and eventually knocked out Ulberg. Kind of the same thing with Ion Cutelaba as well. Weathered the storm in that fight, picked his shots, eventually landed the flying knee. Same with Devin Clark as well, where Clark was kind of pressuring Nzechukwu, eventually got caught in the guillotine. I wanted to say ninja choke, but I remember distinctly he choked him out with the guillotine. Defensively, Nzechukwu's improving in the wrestling and clinch phase. His frame gives him natural leverage, and his ability to push the head, widen his base, and keep opponents off his hips have grown more reliable over time. He's not impervious to takedowns, as you saw when Volter Walker just blitzed him in a minute and eventually caught the inverted heel hook. I would say Nzechukwu's is at his best when he has consistent space to work. The more clean the fight is, the more the rhythm tilts for him. The biggest problem with Nzechukwu is that sometimes if a fighter gives him no respect, they can put him out of his game. He is sometimes very inconsistent where he looks super elite, like against Clark, against Bresky, Barnett, whatever. But against sometimes a very high level fighter, or at least a fighter with a simple game plan, but one they execute continuously, like Walter Walker going for the heel hooks, or Dustin Jacoby being a patient counter striker, or hell, even Oven St. Preux fighting in the phone booth. Nzechukwu can sometimes look overwhelmed and kind of run out of ideas. That's his biggest issue in fighting. It is consistently inconsistent. Now looking at Buchecha, he is one of the purest grapplers to ever enter MMA, and his transitions are effortless. His control is suffocating, and his ability to anticipate defensive reactions is rooted in more than a decade of elite competition. There we go. I mean, he's fought. He's had really good competitive rounds with like the Rodolfo Vieira, to name a few. And like I said, his credentials speak for themselves. He's one of the greatest heavyweight jiu-jitsu artists for sure. In fact, he's on the level of like Minotauro and whatnot, if we're talking like pure jiu-jitsu. Now, what makes Buchecha dangerous isn't just the submissions, it's how quickly he can climb through position. If he gets to the hips, he can chain takedowns together until something breaks open. And if he gets on top position, his weight distribution and positional discipline make escape extremely difficult. Every small scramble does become an opportunity for him to turn a half mistake into a full mount, a back take, or threatening a submission sequence. He's not just good on the ground, he is defined by his ground game. Now, Buchecha's striking is functional. It's not refined by any means, but it's a means to an end. Like you see a lot of high-level grapplers. Their striking, they use his punches as entries, a setup, a way to close the window and close the space between him and his opposition. He can throw with power, but his stand-up game is not built for long exchanges or for managing distance against experienced strikers. It's built around advancing positions so he can get to clinch range, body locks, or reactive entries. His success is heavily tied to the transitions that lead to grappling. And if the fight stays in space, his tools are very limited. Now, and if he can get inside and force the fight into close quarters, he does become one of the most dangerous heavyweights. The question relies in the middle. Can he safely navigate the space between the striking distance and the grappling engagement? I will say, not to call him a cheat, but you do notice how Buchecha seemed a lot more drained in his fight against Martin Buday in a slow-paced fight than he was in one. One's events don't normally take place in the U.S. and their drug testing is not as good as excuse me. Granted, the UFC's drug testing is something else entirely, but they are a bit better at it than I would say one. Again, not to call Buchecha a drug cheat because I don't want to. I don't have evidence. I don't have proof. But it is something to keep in mind that you see him in one, and you see him in at least his debut against Buday, and it could have been octagon jitters, but he did not perform the same. I'll leave it at that. Now, this fight obviously hinges on the transitional moments, the seconds where Buchecha tries to close the distance and the seconds where Nzechukwu tries to maintain it. At range, the advantage leans drastically towards Nzechukwu. His jab, his teeps, and his long counter strikes all serve as barriers that Buchecha must go through in order to get to the path of success. Anytime Buchecha enters without full commitment, he's at risk of getting checked, intercepted, or just straight up knocked out. And Nzechukwu doesn't have to overwhelm him. He just has to keep the fight long enough to disrupt Buchecha's entries. But Buchecha only needs a single successful closing of distance to radically shift this fight to his favor. If he gets a body lock, if he pins Nzechukwu against the cage, or if he catches a kick and turns it into a takedown, the fight transforms like that. And there are very few fighters alive who can survive extended grappling stretches with Buchecha without giving up significant positions. I mean, I think of the Buday fight and how Buday had some success with it, but there are also times where he was mounted successfully for a good few minutes of that fight. And I don't think Nzechukwu is as good at wrestling as Buday is. Now, however, Nzechukwu's takedown defense has gotten better, and he's pretty good at threatening with chokes. Now, if he pulls guard with a guillotine, then he's a flat out idiot. But I don't think he's going to do that. I think his tall base makes entry slightly riskier to execute cleanly, especially if he can intercept them with a knee. And his ability to force resets creates accumulative frustration for grapplers who thrive on consistently shooting takedowns. So the clash becomes one of persistence versus presence. Buchecha's persistence to close distance and grapple against Nzechukwu's presence in the striking range. Now, I think as the minutes stretch on, I think the fight begins to favor the man who can keep the fight in their domain the longest, whether that's Buchecha keeping this on the ground or Nzechukwu keeping this standing up. I'll tell you now, betting-wise, I wouldn't touch this fight at all. Like, Kennedy is a slight favorite at -130 to the +110 Buchecha. But with Nzechukwu being inconsistent at times and Buchecha gassing out in a slow-paced fight, and now he's fighting a much better striker, there are some very dangerous, in terms of betting, there's just some risks to this fight I just wouldn't take. But my official prediction, I'm going to go with Kenny Nzechukwu. I think he can keep this at range and at a safe distance for long portions of this fight with that jab of his teep, and just counter straights. And while I think Buchecha could secure some grappling sequences, I think the cumulative effect of fighting an uphill battle in the striking range wears on him, and eventually he'll tire out. And I think eventually Nzechukwu is going to get the knockout in this one. So, once again, I'm going to pick Kenny Nzechukwu, and I'm going to pick him via TKO in this one. But with that being said, that's been my breakdown of this fight. If you liked the video, like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on who you think is going to win. But until then, I've been Bo from Brutal Commentary. Stay calm, stay respectful, and enjoy the violence. I'll see you all next time.